To understand Hegel's philosophy of art, we really have to get beyond two of our own prejudices. First, we tend to think of art as something that an individual does. An individual makes artworks. Second, we think of art as clearly different from religion, clearly different from philosophy. But Hegel's analysis of art makes the exact opposite point. Art, religion, and philosophy are three ways of looking at the same basic practice, which is expressing recognition of what's ultimately true. And that thing, whether we call it art or religion or philosophy, is something done by a human community before it's done by an individual. To ourselves and to each other, we have to basically say who we are. We have to figure ourselves out. And a community comes together by doing that. A community comes together as that community unites itself in the activity of recognizing who it is. And recognizing who it is doesn't mean placing a name on itself. It really means grasping, what the world is and where we fit in it. This is who we are. We're this kind of thing that answers to this world. And so a community really comes together in that act of saying, what's really going on here? What's really important? What do we need to recognize? And you can see that that thing I've just named is art and religion and philosophy. It's religion in the sense that it is the act of giving recognition to what needs to be recognized. It's philosophy in that sense of recognizing what ultimate truth really is. And it's art in the sense that it's giving expression to what it is that needs to be expressed. So art and religion and philosophy are different ways of looking at that essential thing that is the way a community comes into being in the same move in which it collectively articulates what it takes to be the ultimate nature of things, or what we could call the absolute, what it takes to be absolute and ultimate. But now, what is it that you're doing when you're talking about what's absolute and ultimate? Well, you're talking about what's not relative, what's not, proximate. In your daily life, you have to cook your dinner, you have to go hunt for a deer, you have to make a fire, whatever it is people do in their daily life. When you're talking about what's ultimate, you're saying, I'm not talking about any of these finite actions. I'm talking about the context within which they make sense, the context that gives purpose and existence and meaning to all those activities. So to talk about what's ultimately true is precisely to say not those practical details of everyday life, but what they're ultimately all about. So not these finite and relative things that we do, but the thing that's really infinite, the thing that's really what defines all of this, what is true through all of these different things that happen. And so that essential religious or artistic or philosophical gesture that is the kind of founding activity by which a community brings itself into being is the way it expresses that, is the way it gives expression to the infinite and the absolute. But now how's it going to give expression to that? The only way you can give expression to something is by using something. You have to use some material means to make an expression. You can use your voice, you can use some wood, you can use some stone, but you're going to take something as your medium for expressing. And that medium is going to be something finite. That medium is going to be one kind of thing rather than another kind of thing, and it's going to be this one piece of that kind of thing as opposed to that other piece of this kind of thing. Right? So your expression is always going to be enacted and realized through finite means. So what is that original gesture? The original gesture that is the founding of human community is the use of finite materials to express the infinite. But that's obviously a contradiction. The finite materials are finite, and precisely what they have to express is the exact opposite of the finite. They have to express the infinite. So that gesture has to take finite materials and use the finite material to say, not the finite. And that idea of the finite material that has to announce the absolute precisely by negating its own finitude, that's what Hegel calls symbolic art, right? That's the form of the original absolute gesture, the original artistic practice, the original religious practice, the original philosophical practice. Hegel's talking about the way, as I said, that communities come into being, which is also the way that our ways of expressing things come into being. So he's talking about the situation where you don't have some other means that you could use to say this or express this. He's talking about the way that humanity brought into being its ability to recognize this thing that needs to be recognized. So when he's talking about this original artistic / religious / philosophical gesture, he's talking about the oldest gestures there are. He's talking about the original artistic processes by which humanity gave itself a voice in giving expression to reality. And so what Hegel calls symbolic art is the art of the oldest cultures. What he calls symbolic art is, a particular approach to artistic work, which could also exist in other contexts and surely does. But he's interested in this in the history of art as such and the history of religion as such, the history of human culture as such, right? He's interested in symbolic art as essentially a stage by which art brought itself into being. Symbolic art as an essential stage of arting, which of course can be reproduced in all kinds of other contexts where all kinds of other things are already happening. But we're talking about art here when all that other stuff isn't happening. And indeed, we're talking about art here as the thing that has to happen so that a lot of that other stuff even becomes possible. So when Hegel's talking about symbolic art, he's talking about the artworks of ancient Mesopotamian culture, ancient India, ancient Egypt. It could be true of some other similar cultures too, but those are the ones he particularly wants to talk about. Partially because those are the ones who are bringing something into being kind of on the world stage, bringing something into being in the history of humanity as such. And so the thing he really wants to notice then about those cultures is that they're built around this idea of an affirmation of a kind of infinite that in a way is being said for the first time. And it's being said through the finite means we have available to us. So that thing that's being recognized is that all this has to be explained. This doesn't explain itself, right? This is the recognition that comes from seeing yourself and seeing the world and being struck by the fact of that existence and saying, wow, I can't make myself. These things can't make themselves. This world of us and the rest of nature calls out to us of the need to recognize whatever that mysterious power is that is the source of all this. So he says in the ancient Persian religion of Zarathustra, it's light and fire that's venerated. And Hegel says you can see there that turning to light is kind of like turning to that life-giving source. It's the thing we find in the natural world that illuminates everything, that lets growth and so on happen. And it's kind of like that thing in the natural world that most sort of naturally announces the source of the natural world. And so turning to light and venerating that is kind of the original way of saying the source. In the religion or religions of ancient India, Hegel sees another kind of expression that makes basically the same point but in a different way. He says in a lot of the ancient Indian images are of figures with many arms or many heads or other kinds of fantastical characteristics. And he says the thing you're seeing there is recognizable things from our world, a monkey, a person, whatever it is, recognizable finite things are being given a kind of imaginative development that is outside the possibility of what could happen in our natural world. So in the first case with the sun, you're seeing a finite thing that kind of stands in for the infinite. It's like the best emblem of source within the finite options you have for you. In the images from India, you're seeing another way of kind of going beyond the finite because you're taking this finite thing, but you're expanding it fantastically. And so, adding a bunch of arms is really just a quantitative multiplication, but it has that effect of imaginatively propelling you beyond the finite. You'd see something similar to that in Egypt with the gods who have human bodies and animal heads, because again, you're getting a kind of fantastical creation which violates the terms of the finite world as you know it, to imaginatively send you beyond this world. And the ultimate image of this basically is the Egyptian pyramid, because that's actually a constructed thing that's trying to make this point. It takes finite materials and makes this construction to, in a way, bespeak mystery. It's got the solid earthly foundation going up to the heavens, sort of announcing to you the need to ascend beyond. And people experience that as massive, overwhelming, and invoking a kind of mystery. So that's the basic character of symbolic art in general. It is using these different kinds of finite resources to invoke the infinite. And different cultures that have been doing that, have kind of relied on different means. But they're in a way doing that same thing. And the thing that's noticeable about all of them then is that they're all in a way saying, not this. They're saying, whatever finite thing we confront you with, whether it's sun or a figure with many arms or a big pile of stones, they're saying, the point isn't a big pile of stones. The point isn't a figure with many arms. The point is to be led by that to the recognition of the beyond, the ultimate, the absolute. So these original artistic gestures have this particular form that their form does not equal their content. And that's kind of the content of them, is to say, my form doesn't equal the content, right? These are all things that give you something finite, where that finite thing is precisely saying, not the finite, indeed, not this, but the infinite. And in some ways, that's most powerfully brought out in the ancient Hebrew culture, which Hegel also talks about. The Hebrew poetry in the book of Genesis or the book of Job or the book of Tobit all make this same basic point. In the context of the book of Job, Job's this guy, he's out, gets caught in a sandstorm, but to him, the sandstorm suddenly makes him realize something. Sandstorm is a pretty finite thing, but he experiences that finite thing as the imperative to recognize the infinite. And so in Job 38 to 39, you have this beautiful poem. What does God say to him through the sandstorm? And he says, did you visit the sources of the sea? Did you make the wild donkey wild? Do you get up in the morning to make the sun rise? Do you make the stars shine at night? The poem is basically doing the same thing the sandstorm is doing. In the poem, all those things are just being recognized. Star, sun, wild animal, ocean, whatever they are. But those things have suddenly been transformed from just being a familiar thing you're dealing with to something that is now announcing itself to you as a kind of problem or a kind of question. Where did this come from? And you didn't make it. So the poem doesn't use anything else than the finite materials of the world, but it uses them in this very effective way to express the infinite. Just taking those things and putting them in the form of a question. Stars? Sun? Suddenly, those things announce that mysterious source of nature, that mysterious source of themselves. And so Job is encountering the same natural things he encountered before, but now he's encountering them as kind of miraculous gifts, and he's experiencing them as the need then to recognize the source to which he should be thankful, because that's where it comes from, whatever that is. It's not him, and he doesn't know what it is. And that's the same basic point that's made in the story of Tobit. Tobit goes blind, and eventually his son is able to do some things to his eyes, and he's suddenly able to see. And so now he can see the world again. And he sees his son, and that's really great. But also, and he appreciates those things, but also he suddenly, in seeing, sees his seeing. He suddenly sees, oh wow, this is this amazing, wonderful gift I have. I lost it, and now I got it back. I didn't make it, but it's miraculous that I can see my son and see the world. So he suddenly went from having his seeing be a way of engaging with the finite demands of his everyday life to being a thing that kind of announced itself as a gift through which he experienced the need to, give thanks to whatever the source is that makes all that possible. So in Job and in Tobit, you see in sort of poetic form, in words, the same basic point that's being made in a pyramid or in those Indian figures or in the worship of the sun. And again, if you think about the pyramid as this construction that has actually been made to make that point, right? It's in that sense, it's the artistic act par excellence. That's exactly what's described in the story of Jacob's ladder in Genesis 28. Jacob's out in the desert or whatever, and stops for the night, goes to sleep, has a dream that sort of is about these same kind of issues. And he wakes up, and just like Job experienced the storm as the absolute announcing itself, Jacob is having that same experience right here and right now. And he says, oh, this place here, the Lord is here. This is the gateway to heaven. And what he does is, he was using a stone as a pillow to sleep on. He takes that stone and he sets it up to mark that. And he says, I'm going to use this stone to mark that this is the house of God. And so that thing that Jacob is doing with the stone, that is the original artistic gesture. And you can see the thing he's doing there. That's the same thing the Egyptians are doing with the pyramids, or, people in Britain are doing at Stonehenge, literally setting up a stone to, in a way, announce the mystery of the world to which we're all answerable. So that's what Hegel calls symbolic art, the sort of original artistic gesture by which human communities as such came into being, through which they were able to give voice to the terms in which they're going to recognize themselves and recognize the world. We'll go on next time to talk about classical art and bring in a little bit more history, and the story will start to get filled out even more.